Adma here. So Valentine is coming up in about 2 days from when I'm recording this, and Samsung just dropped the Samsung Galaxy S20, S20 Plus, and S20 Ultra just yesterday night. Now, this video I'll be covering the Samsung Galaxy S20 and S20 Plus, but then I'll cover the S20 Ultra in another video. Now, the first thing I actually want to address is that name. I was not expecting actually that the leaks would be true and they would be calling it the S20. I was actually thinking that they'd continue with the S10, S11, S12, but who knows. Now, my guess is that they're probably going to do that. Probably by 2030 they will be doing the S30 and then S31, S32, and so on and so forth. But then that's a rant for a whole other decade. For now, let's actually talk about the S20 and S20 Plus. Now, because this is a Nigerian man's impressions, I'm actually going to break this down into what I think most Nigerian people actually talk about. The first actually being the cameras. Now, the camera is probably one of the most asked questions any Nigerian person I know will ask. The first thing they ask is, how good is the camera? That's the first thing they always ask. But then I'm not going to talk about the camera first. I'm actually going to talk about the design first, which is what draws on you to actually look into this phone and see that this phone is okay, this phone is worth considering. So what then now leads me to talk about the camera? So let's talk about that design. Now, the first time I saw this phone, I was breathtaking. Now, let's be honest, Samsung has been doing some very amazing stuff with their screens. I mean, the first time that they came up with a screen that curves over the edges, everyone was like, oh my God, wow, this is amazing, and all of that kind of stuff. But then over time, people then started to say that it's pointless, there's no need to actually do it. And a lot of people complained and complained and complained until they finally did it. And in the S20, despite the fact there's actually a curve, you may not notice it. Now, the first time I saw it, I actually thought it was flat. Then I looked a bit better, and then I now saw that there was just a gentle curve. It's not much, it's a very little amount of curve. It just makes the screen look totally flat. And then with those very thin bezels all around, my God, this phone looks absolutely futuristic. I'm not even joking at all. I saw this phone and I was like, wow, that's one hell of a screen to look at. Around the back though, why they didn't do maybe some gradient finish is totally unclear to me. It's not like as if I care about gradient finishes and all of that. There are some people that may actually care about that, but I'm not in that category. But then over time, as I looked at this phone, one thing became clear to me. The design is breathtaking. I don't think it's a display that you get used to, because looking at it, the chin is almost not there. There's no forehead, almost. The side bezels are practically non-existent. And it's now this very huge screen with a very high screen to body ratio, with a very good display panel, 1440p for both of them. And you think, damn, that's amazing. Now, for people that actually care about the screen sizes, the S20 is about 6.2 inches, while the S20 Plus is about 6.7 inches. Very huge screens, but then they have 20:9 aspect ratio, so you shouldn't have too much of a problem actually holding them in your hand. The only place where I may actually say some people will have issues has to be the lack of a headphone jack. Now, I didn't actually want to talk about this because I myself have moved on. I've moved on from the headphone jack. I don't think it should be there in any of our top tier phones anymore. If anyone is putting the headphone jack, it's just an added bonus. It's not something that is required in your phone for it to be a top seller. So that screen is beautiful. Now, the best part about this entire screen is the fact that it refreshes at 120 Hz. Now, I don't think there's a 90 Hz option in the setting, but there should probably be. I've seen a lot of people actually making videos saying that there isn't actually a need for 120 Hz, that 90 Hz should be like the default for like every smartphone. Now, I've never actually held a phone with a high refresh rate before, but then I'm going to guess that from what I've seen so far in those videos, 90 Hz is good, 120 Hz is better. If you can get it, why not? So 120 Hz, as much as it will absolutely drain your battery, I don't think some people will actually turn it off. If they're actually going to turn off 120 Hz, they're actually going to set it down to about 90 Hz, if there is a 90 Hz option. Now, one thing to note is, Marquez pointed out in his video, he said that when you set the phone to 120 Hz, it automatically decreases the phone's screen resolution to 1080p. Now, of course, that's smart. It's trying to save battery. But then, 1080p? Really? Why? It's Samsung. I mean, well, in the end, 1080p is still very sharp and vibrant, so it doesn't really matter in the end. But then, that's pretty much everything about the design. I mean, it's a very breathtaking design. Like I said before, futuristic looking screen that goes from edge to edge and looks almost like as though the entire front of the phone is just display. Very good speakers, very good design, very good everything actually. So let's actually leave the display and actually talk about the cameras. Now, the camera is another thing altogether. A 12 megapixel main camera, a 64 megapixel telephoto lens at 3 times optical zoom, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. Now, in all the impressions videos I've seen, the ultra wide lens isn't as wide as, say, the iPhone 11's camera, but then it's still pretty high and pretty okay. It still gets in a lot of things into your shot. And then I'm actually fine with this. There are some people that will actually complain that it's not high enough, or rather it's not wide enough for them, and that they can't actually use this camera. But then what's the point of having your camera so wide and then the edges of your camera, or rather the edges of your shots, look like as though you put them inside a barrel? I mean, there are some compromises that I actually think are worth it. Now, how will shots from this camera fare? It's Samsung. What do you expect from Samsung? Now, we all know that the S20 Ultra has a 108 megapixel camera, but then I'll still get to that. It has its own separate video. But then, looking at these camera specs, the fact that this phone can record at 8K too is amazing. Now, I don't see people actually using the 8K feature in video often. In fact, at all, because one, not a lot of screens support 8K content. Not a lot of screens support 8K content. Not a lot of platforms offer 8K content. I mean, there's practically no need for 8K at the moment, but it's there if you need it. The highest thing is probably you record in 8K and then you downscale to about 4K or so, which is what people watch most of the time. But then that's just personal preference. If you want to record in 8K, please, by all means, feel free. Now, the rest of the phone is pretty much what you'd expect from typical Samsung flagships. I mean, you have Snapdragon 865, 12 or 8 gigs of RAM, 8 or 12 gigs of RAM, about 128 gigs of internal storage, bumpable up to 512 on the S20 Plus, and then it still has a micro SD card slot on top, which means you can still boost your storage up to about half of 2 terabytes. That's 1.5 TB, which is massive. I mean, basically, a phone now has more storage capacity than my own laptop. Jesus, it even has more RAM than my own laptop. I mean, okay, I will not talk. Well, that's pretty much everything about the S20 and S20 Plus. Now, the only difference I see between these two, apart from their price, is the fact that they have different size screens. The S20 Plus has just a little bit more internal storage, and yeah, that's all. Okay, and also the S20 Plus has an extra camera. It's a depth sensing camera, which is okay. It's good for doing portrait mode shots and the rest of them. But then, other than that, there isn't much of a difference. So, if you were asking me which one I'd actually get, I'd actually go with the S20. I mean, it's cheaper and you get everything you get from the S20 Plus in the S20 normal, and all you're missing out on is just that bigger screen. That's just my thoughts though. Let me know in the comment sections below what you think. Make sure you tune in for the S20 Ultra video. That will be coming very, very soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.